Welcome to Munich Airport. This is very close to our home and close also to our heart, because this is where DSS Europe started more than 10 years ago. And when you look at the airport, you see these beautiful colors, but unfortunately it's quite deserted, like most inner cities, not much happening. But this show, I think we have some fantastic stuff coming up.
Yeah, we've got a special looking back to 2020, but looking also forward to 2021. And we have a very special guest today.
Oh yeah, Oliver Schwede will join us. He was one of the founding partners of Invidis before he left 4 years ago. And we have a very interesting discussion with him.
Yes, and beyond that, we have project examples. We're going to talk about technologies, but also about larger trends for 2021.
So let's start with the show. Stefan, year in review 2020 cannot go without COVID-19, unfortunately. We're here at Munich Airport at the Hilton Hotel. Most of you will know that from our DSS for more than 10 years. It's part of our DSS history. And this industry was hit pretty hard. 90%, 80-90% less traffic, less revenue, so that's quite extensive. So the past 12 months, we talked a lot about COVID-19. We analyzed it, we sliced it in any way. We had weekly calls, executive lounge, happy hours. We talked probably more than 100 times with leaders of the industry in the past 12 months. So we don't want to go really deep, but maybe just a short overview to what happened in 2020.
Sure. It's really a roller coaster ride, and we started analyzing it from a macroeconomic perspective. You remember the Great Frost in UK 300 years ago. So it was the biggest hit to the UK economy in the past 300 years, but it also hit other economies really, really hard. And we looked at the different economies from Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, really hard hit. In the northern countries it was a bit less, so Germany got away a bit better, but overall the effects were pretty hard. Then we learned a whole new alphabet. From V-shaped recoveries, L-shaped recoveries, and so on and so on. But it all boils down to what kind of sneaker brand you prefer. So what's your preferred one?
Well, Nike. I need to go with Nike.
So you're the swoosh type.
I'm the swoosh type, yeah.
Yeah, so my French wife has me as an optimist, so I'm more the Veja type, so the V-shaped recovery type. So you can show it by wearing the right pair of sneakers. That's something we learned. Then we went on to analyze different industries. I mean, the difference couldn't be bigger between offline fashion and e-commerce, but there's a whole spectrum in between. And then we went on to analyzing effects on businesses, going through different business cycles, and also what kind of problems they face in these cycles. Also on a more macroeconomic level, the expectation of which businesses will go out of business and which businesses will thrive. Look at these effects and always thinking about what it does to customers, but also what it does to changing consumer needs and consumer habits.
That's really interesting, because consumer habits changed a lot during the pandemic, much faster and much bigger than we ever thought. And what's quite interesting, and probably one of the most interesting research we discovered in the past 12 months, was really about, that customers want more digital touch points because they're scared in interacting with human beings. Quite difficult for stationary retail because that's their strength. But we see some really great numbers that they want more screens, more interactivity. Touch is something people prefer.
Yeah, that's part of the good news in the crisis. That's digital really is part of the solution and not part of the problem. So really opportunities are out there to serve customers better. And that's something we did throughout all our analysis, always breaking it down, what it means to the digital signage industry, what it means to the companies that we are working with, really trying to analyze where are the opportunities, where are the threats, what can you do. And a along these lines, we looked at solutions on entrance control was kind of the
big
thing. At the beginning of lockdown, we saw tons and tons of solutions around that, but we also looked at other things.
Well, communication, for example. It's not only about the hardware and displays and LEDs and projection, but it's really how retailers, how employers start communicating with their staff, with their customers. Quite interesting, and 2-3 different levels, I think, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's content, and you would think digital is ideal for quickly changing content, but we saw a lot of printed posters anyhow. But there again, you saw the whole spectrum of communication between mandatory communication, like you have to keep your distance, wear a mask and things like that. But there was also emotional communication, more like getting people closer to the brand, but also feel-good communication, bringing people back to the high street, back into the stores, between the lockdowns, a lot of this.
Yeah, it's funny enough, it seemed like ages ago, but now we're back in a full lockdown, and going to a store seems like a nice vision.
Yeah, but I mean, we also saw other reactions of companies dealing with this crisis, like Whole Foods closed their stores actually and transformed them into warehouses to do local deliveries. So we saw business model pivots in that case. But what else did we see?
Well, also the whole layout, the whole design of store changed due to COVID. It was quite interesting to really see that not only here in the hotel, it's much more space, everything is spread apart, you need to keep social distancing, 2 meters, that's a lot of space. We saw a lot of plexiglass, coming in stores, but the whole setup changed.
Yeah. Similar thing for offices. Also, offices changed a lot, more distance, less desks, all of these things, and
okay. But also operations, quite interestingly. So not only posters and digital, but operations change. For example, fitting rooms. Some fashion brands really started to disinfect every garment, which people tried on, and then they had to store it for 2 days to make sure it's totally clean, everything. Obviously, that wasn't a business case.
Yeah, but where is a business case is live shopping, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It's big in Asia, but we also saw it over here in Europe and in the US.
Yeah, hybrid shopping. So the stores become like a studio. It's really interesting because the clothes are there, all the products are there, and you can position, you can use your staff and really use them as a showmaster to present something. So it was really interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
So what did we learn throughout the crisis? For me, one of the big learnings was to think in scenarios for the future. There is no one fixed scenario. We saw it for lockdown scenarios. We had 3 of them. Now we are stuck in the long lockdown scenario. But really thinking in these different worlds and different futures is one thing I learned.
Yeah. Not only futures, but also politics. There was also a lot of changes. Obviously, US elections, Brexit. And sustainability, climate change, everything. So these are 3 huge topics which really dominated 2020. US elections are now over more or less, so that's probably makes it a little bit easier. Brexit, it's still a very hard Brexit, even there was a last minute little contract on Christmas Eve, but still, we see, shipping goods between UK and EU is more difficult, more expensive, everything. So Brexit has an impact, and we will, start feeling it throughout the year, I guess. And yes, green signage, power consumption, all of these topics, will be the dominating topics in the future. No question about it.
What were the key learnings for top industry leaders from 2020? How do they prepare for 2021? And what keeps them up at night? Here are their answers.
My best experience of the year has been spending more time at home, as I live in a beautiful part of the world, North Wales. My worst experience has been not being able to travel.
I'm counting the days to take a flight again to visit customers and vendors.
The best that happened to us, well, more time to innovate. The worst experience, we had a few projects that has been postponed or even cancelled.
The worst experience was to see our clients and partners suffering, but the best experience was to see the reaction of the team and how they all adapted very quickly to the new situation and the new challenges.
The pandemic also gave us a chance to take a step back.
The best experience during the pandemic crisis was working with customers to tackle the new ways of accessing and communicating in the stores.
From a personal front, it's been with the full family. Got 2 older kids, they came back, put massive pressure on my wine collection, but it was amazing them living in our house again for 3 months.
During the lockdown, we discussed a lot with our customers, and they gave us the idea to create a new software solution to transform the workstation of the employee into communication channels. So even bad thing can lead to innovation and a new software solution.
We have to really push the boundaries on everything we do. The world's requirements will be completely different in 21 to where they were last year. And we really need to stretch our creativity and entrepreneurial spirit to keep pace with that.
The pandemic reminded us how important online presence is. In this sense, we designed platforms that will bring us together with all our stakeholders.
Just keep talking, whether it's socially or through business. Make sure everyone's okay and keep the dialogue open.
And I want to ensure also that our teams in country are fully up to date about this industry. What keeps me awake at night, definitely, to glimpse an end of this uncertainty. And also, well, super excited about having my second baby in less than a month.
The persistence of the consumer crisis in retail. Second, the long wave of potential failures during the next year.
That speed of movement means we could easily get to the wrong place very quickly or the right place very quickly. So I spend a lot of time thinking about, are we heading in the right direction? And we have to, as I said, talk to everybody to sense check that all the time.
I do sleep like a log, but I do worry about the education for the children being so broken up this year, and also the difference between people who have computers and space in the home, like I'm very lucky to have, and those that do not.
I cannot see any professional topic preventing me to sleep at night. This pandemic, it's a waste. It will be a waste of 2 years in the industry like anywhere else. So we just have to accept that and to be patient and to build, to get ready for the future.
One thing that concerns me regarding the future is the possibility of being locked down will continue more than we guess. And the mutations. I don't even want to talk about that.
What keeps me up at night is perfection and excellence. I'm a bit obsessed, and when you are focused on excellence and perfection, you never find a moment to stop.
Florian, let's talk about tech, our top 10 tech trends for the year. And I'd like to start with LED.
Well, 2020 was the year of LED, obviously. The most dominating topic, especially micro LED. Quite interesting. The market wasn't really focusing on what's the best technology available, like 0.8 mil or so, but really they found a sweet spot, which is like between 1.2 and 1.6 mil, which like Samsung, the wall for business, introduced to the market, and then was also copied by Sony and other players in the market. So that was really interesting that this seems to be, the product really which the market really is looking for. So fantastic picture quality, but not 0.8, but a little bit less.
But that's not the main market for LED, is it?
No, the main market obviously remains SMD. Almost everything is manufactured in China, and 50% of the SMD is also sold and installed in China. So China has been, was and will be the largest market for LED, obviously, yeah.
So then let's switch to the bread and butter business, LCD displays.
Yeah, Digital signage without LCD wouldn't be possible, obviously. LCD on the first look, not much has changed. We're still, looking at 98 inches. Yes, there are a few with 120, but 98 inches is pretty much the basic one. The simple answer is, it still fits through the door. Anything else you need to do it differently. So this is still. But what we have seen, more resolution, 4K, 8K. Use cases are quite limited for 8K for the time being, but obviously that's technically possible, so we will see more and more on that coming. But what we see, the biggest changes we saw is the backlight. And so the displays are getting slimmer and slimmer because they're replacing that backlight with mini LED. And we saw that now at CES, a lot of announcement there, more in the consumer market, but we'll definitely also see the next couple months, especially at ISE coming there with mini LEDs, so much slimmer LCD screens.
Talking about slim LCD, we have to talk about OLED.
Yeah, OLED. That's obviously still the game of LG, and many people really underestimate the potential of OLED, to be honest, because on mobile phones and in dashboards, car dashboards also, OLED is dominating. It's really the technology to have. In digital signage, it's a showstopper. Everyone loves it. It's so thin. It has speakers included and everything. But unfortunately, really, hasn't really taken off. But we will see more and more stuff coming. It was just announced that LG will now also produce and offer smaller OLEDs. In the 40-inch category range and even down to 30-inch. So let's see. Let's look what's happening there.
And in that range, we see a lot of touch devices. That would be my next topic. What about touch and ILCD?
Well, touch ILCD mostly in meeting rooms. Obviously, COVID and the pandemic has changed, how we work. The majority of people, are currently working from home. But this will change hopefully soon enough. But the meeting room will change, obviously. We won't have 100 people sitting in one small room, so we have smaller rooms, we have huddle spaces, but we will still have this central, thing, this interactive display with more sensors, obviously, cameras and everything included for video conferencing, everything collaboration. So we will see lots of stuff coming there, and there is a future for touch. It's still, the most easy way to interact. So we believe there's absolutely a future for touch, yeah.
You talked about offices, and that brings me to our next topic. It's projection. Projection used to be dominant in offices, but it's no longer, is it?
Well, projection is probably, the loser of 2020, unfortunately, no live events, no cinemas, nothing. So it's pretty difficult. And yes, it's a niche product currently. But the technology works, and in small scales, for example, when you have like ultra short throw projection, which is quite nice. And even, players like Samsung, now decided, okay, let's have another look at laser projection. And they introduced a consumer product, which, let's see what's happening there. But there's some movement happening there, yeah.
So let's move from pictures to players. So what's happening on the player side with OPS, SDM, SOC? Do you have any other three-letter abbreviations?
Well, unfortunately not IBM, but they're not doing that. No, it's just, obviously, all the built-in media players play a huge role. So the SoC ones, from Tizen from Samsung, WebOS from LG, and Android, which is used by Philips, by Sony, and Panasonic, and others also. These are the three dominating platforms. But don't forget also, what players like Sharp NEC use. They use like a plug-in Raspberry Pi, which is, fantastically well for digital poster projects also. So a lot of stuff are happening. But on the slot and PC-wise, so we see more and more SDM-based displays are now being available at the market. They were announced already a year ago, but now you can buy them. And so obviously, SDM will eventually replace OPS because it's much smaller and more powerful. Yeah.
The next topic we have to talk about is what runs on the players, so software.
Yeah, quite interesting. In the past, the software market, the CMS market, digital signage market was quite simple, Digital signage was a silo. So you had some players, which are really big in digital signage across the world. But customers are starting to think differently at how they manage content. And they want to manage content across all platforms. And so not only digital signage, so we see new player coming to market. We see them already there, at least for larger customers. And so we see new names like Salesforce, like Adobe, like SAP or so. They're coming to the market offering experience platforms, which offer lots of features, and one of them is also obviously playing out to signage.
Yeah, but in the more traditional digital signage world, there's always a fight between independent software vendors and the integrators that have their own software.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. As the market is consolidating, we see the larger integrator offering their own software. They want to offer everything, from A to Z. So for the independent software vendors, it's getting more difficult because their best integrators, are now, either consolidating or, offering their own solutions. So it's going to be more difficult for them. Yeah.
And on the independent side, we see some vendors promoting low-code or no-code solutions.
Yeah, that's also one of the trends, not only in signage, but also many other IT applications. The no-code stuff is quite interesting, especially when you want to do small changes, some stuff or so. So you don't need, experts to do that. But obviously, once you start digging a little bit deeper, and connecting your signage, your no-code signage systems, to SAP or some other back office systems, obviously you need some experience. Not so much on the signage side, but you need to understand, how to connect your backend to signage.
So the next category is sensors. There are lots of them out there. What's your take on them?
Yeah, sensors is on one hand very sexy because there's so many new technologies coming up and new solutions, which is quite interesting. But unfortunately, there are no standards. So it's very difficult to connect them to your system, especially to connect them reliable. It's easy to do it in your showroom or so where you can but really have them, across hundreds or thousands of stores and make sure that it works. That's a little bit more difficult. There are certain vendors who are now, offering like a middleware where you can connect the sensors, so it makes sense. But for us, really, the sensor topic is more a data topic. It's very easy to collect data, but it's very challenging to analyze it and getting the right insights out of it.
And data always asks the question about connectivity, how to get the data back to your server, back into the cloud.
Well, connectivity doesn't go without 5G, obviously, in 2020 or 2021. Yes, 5G is doing a lot of, it's a big breakthrough. But when we talk about connectivity, it's not only about 5G, but it's also about 4G. It's about narrowband IoT. It's about LTE-M. So there are different technologies for different use cases. And it doesn't always have to be, the broadband solution, but sometimes, some smaller bandwidths are fully fine for that. And so we see, it's quite interesting.
So we had 9 really tech topics now, but we also need to talk about content, because content is what makes digital signage concept great. So what's happening on the content side?
Well, it will always be about content, to be honest. Nobody wants a black screen, it's the content what customer really wants. So we see lots of changes in regards how content is made and how content is managed. It's not so much anymore focused just on signage, but obviously, across all platforms. So you see different ways. So, the graphics and everything is produced without the text. So, it's just married on the player, at the screen. So you see really, how you can create the same message across all platforms. So it's not a signage game anymore, but something which goes across all platforms. So that's probably the biggest change.
Okay, so 2021 won't be a boring year on the tech side.
No, absolutely, it will be fantastic, and we will see great stuff. And we're looking forward to new trade shows and to meet all the people again and to see new technologies, because you need to experience them. It's nothing you can see on a screen or so.
Nobody knew what is going to happen, but then everything calmed down. Hotel was empty within days. The first priority that Hilton, and I think it was a great achievement that we achieved a worldwide setup. It was the Hilton Clean Stay, which starts with disinfection stations at the main entrance, and then in front of the reception we had like these glass plates. Masks are used in every area in the hotel, and then it's all about social distancing. Whenever business is coming back, we have to be ready, and this was more or less the biggest opportunity to reflect, to see what was going well, what did not go so well. And then of course for us, as this hotel was 25 years old, we had the big opportunity to continue with our renovation processes, and we even speeded it up, and we are very happy now that, let's say almost a year after, 2 parts of the renovation projects are finished and done. Technology is key as well, and especially here we are now in the new Mountain Hub restaurant, so every table has his charging point. We have a very powerful VLAN system, so we are much more beautiful than before, and we are looking into a new bright future as soon as we are allowed to reopen the hotel.
Florian, we want to talk about top installations from the year 2020. There wasn't that much due to COVID, but one is right on our doorstep. It's the new FC Bayern World, right on Marienplatz. You were there. What do you think?
I'm a big fan of the store for various reasons. Usually, many of these top clubs have huge fan stores, which are more like supermarket, like a hyperstore, with thousands and thousands of square meters of space where you can buy, all the jerseys and everything. This store is in the middle of the city. It's relatively small. I mean, they just won the Champions League, so their ego is, I'm sure, quite big, so they would love to have the biggest store.
But it's 3 stories, right?
Exactly, it's 3 floors. It's not that big. It includes a hotel and a cafe and everything. But it's really, the shop is full of emotions, and it really shows, in small little details how you can integrate digital and analog and how you create stories, and an immersive experience. And I think immersive is a really good expression for that.
So let's walk into the store.
Absolutely, yeah. The most fascinating thing is you enter the store and you hit on a staircase. Usually that's not what you want as an architect or designer.
Architectural nightmare.
Exactly. But what's quite nice, they use the staircase and put in LEDs there, so you can really you can tell stories there, and it's a little bit intertwined there. But it's really cool. So you see this huge LED which takes you also downstairs, and it tells fantastic stories. It's really nicely done.
So now that we're in the store, what can you find there?
Well, one of the small details which I like so much are the mannequins. And these are not just standard mannequins which wear the jerseys, but these are 3D prints of the real players. So here you see Müller, and so that's great. So people take selfies of their main players with their favorite players, and it's done really nicely. So it's this emotional story which works well.
So then there's the cashier area. They use projection. So
yes.
Projection isn't dead.
No, projection is alive and kicking. What's really nice, they have the facade of the Allianz Arena, which is the main stadium where FC Bayern plays, and they use projection there, shot throw projection, and they project, images, of the stadium, but also, of the latest, championship wins and everything on the story. So even while you wait, paying for your not very cheap jersey, I assume, they create stories, and you feel that you're in the FC Bayern store.
And it creates a nice 3D effect.
Absolutely. And talking about effects, when you buy your own jersey, obviously, you want to have your name and everything on it. So there's a special area where they decided not to put in screens, but, a lot of old, trophies and small stickers and everything. So this has been done really nicely. And you get the feeling, this is like almost, a little private area, a bar where you can, explore the history of FC Bayern.
And still there's a mix between digital storytelling and the physical elements there.
Absolutely. And then you also have a little football court, where you can sign up and play, real football, with LED game. So gamification is also there, which is really important.
Yeah, we'll see how long it lasts, because we've seen too many of those things.
Yeah, unfortunately, they usually never last long. But it's not so much the technology, but it's often it's people not taking care of it, and then they forget about it. But I hope this is different here.
So another piece of storytelling is their champion trophies, Champions League, German Cup, National Championship. And there's a nice 3D effect to that.
Well, yes, they use transparent screens. I'm not sure if it's OLED or LED, but it's probably OLED. But it's done really nicely, because you're talking on different stages. You have this transparent screen. They show all the years where they won different trophies, and you really create stories. And the light goes on and off, and you know how you can play with these things, with these different levels, and it's done really nicely. Yeah.
So then let's go upstairs.
Yes.
And they're very interesting. They reserved some space for one of their main sponsors and also shareholders, for Audi, car company.
Yeah, funnily enough, when you come to a football store, a fan store, you don't expect, like a car dealership there. Audi is a shareholder of FC Bayern. But what's so really interesting, they have a car configurator, the latest model, obviously, large LED and everything. It's done really nicely. But what you can do, and that's so fascinating, these are the little details we love so much. You can look at the configuration of the cars, which the stars drive. So you know exactly, what Manuel Neuer drives, or you can exactly see, what kind of wheels he has and what kind of colors and everything. There's like 3D animation, so it really integrates, the Audi story as well as FC Bayern.
This and it also has the order here button.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you can print, your little thing and then take it home. But it's not only about these big things, but also about fitting rooms, and you know how important fitting rooms are.
And in this case, they definitely need an interactive mirror.
Yeah, they have an interactive mirror. Interestingly enough, the integrator who has built this, they have done also stuff for Adidas in the past, which is also shareholder and obviously sponsor of the FC Bayern. So you see some of the touch points integrated, they are reused, but it's done really, really nicely. And the fitting rooms are fantastic because every fitting room is different. They have little stickers there, and so it's really fun for a fan to walk through there and to explore the history of FC Bayern.
Yeah, and beyond the magic mirror, there's obviously has to be an Instagrammable moment or Instagrammable point in the store.
Yeah, that's also a selfie point. There's a round display in the window, and you can take a selfie of yourself with all the players. Unfortunately, the camera is positioned a little bit low, so the angle is not perfect. But yes, you can take photos there and share it with your friends, and that's all about. And obviously, also buy some jerseys. I'm sure you can buy them there.
So really a lot to see in that store, and it's a definite must-see when you visit Munich next time.
Absolutely. Welcome, Oliver.
Thank you for the invitation, Florian.
Oliver and I have a long common history. We know each other for many decades. Oliver and I started digital signage invidis 15 years ago. It's an anniversary now this year. Yeah, it's anniversary year. So it's a special honor for us to have you here and to talk a little bit about what has happened in the past 15 years. No, we won't talk about too much about that, but about the real life experience from out there and what integrators experience and how technology really helps and where it's just sounds good on paper. When you talk with customers, how do you decide when to suggest a LCD or LED or so? What is LED? What is the status of LED in your business today?
It's very interesting for us and for the customers as well. When do I recommend to use an LED? Mostly it's in conference room situations. So customers look at their current installation and see that it's maybe an old projection system. So, and then they want a bigger canvas, but they don't want any bezels there. So they decide to go with an display system because it's bright, it's self-illuminated, so it's a much better picture than with traditional projectors, as long as you don't spend 50,000-60,000 euros for a projector. So that's the reason. First, it's the size. So the size, and then you have to decide, can we use special video wall displays, but then you still have this very small bezel. So for instance, we installed a year ago a Barco UniC system. It's not cheap, it's pretty expensive, superb quality of the displays, but you still have this slight bezel. And if you don't want to have this, you have to go with LED. And then the question is, what pixel pitch? In what size? And of course, people, they read all the magazines or the articles, and then they think in resolutions of 4K. And if you do a 4K video wall with a huge canvas, it's an insane amount of money you have to spend. Still, you have to spend. So what we have to discuss with the customers: do we really need this high resolution, or do we stick with full HD resolution because it fits most of the laptop displays?
And that's usually the source, to be honest.
Yes.
It's not the Blu-ray or whatever or a great thing. It's a computer, which is usually the source.
Yes, definitely, and I think it won't change so fast in the future. So then you go with LED, and then it depends on where does the audience sit. So what is the distance from the first viewer to the screen, and based on this, you calculate what kind of pixel pitch you need. You can go down to, 0.8, something like that. So the wall from Samsung and other competitors, but it's still very, very expensive. So you mostly, then we recommend a pixel pitch of 1.2 millimeters. And it's amazing, we did this installation in our headquarter at Cancom, and we have on one side a 110-inch 1.2 millimeters LED video wall, and on the other side there is a 98-inch Samsung display. The 98-inch has a 4K resolution, and then on the other side you have the full HD LED wall. And if you have the same picture on both displays, the LED is so outstanding from the brightness, and we regulated it down, the brightness maybe to half of it, but it's so clear and the colors are so vivid, so you think the LED would be the 4K picture and not the Samsung display.
But also the price is a multitude of obviously of an 80, 98-inch screen, no?
That's true. I mean, it's I think 4 to 5 times the price point of an 98-inch display. And you have always to consider that the installation efforts are much higher. So it's, I mean, we now see the new systems from maybe LG with a magnet
all-in-one, more or less.
All-in-one things. So that makes it much easier to install. But after that, you have to calibrate the wall. So it's much more labor involved building an LED wall than just hanging an LCD display on the wall.
Yeah, interestingly enough, most LED manufacturers now offer these all-in-one solutions. So I think also the wall is part of this. You know, you get everything, including brackets and everything. But it makes a big difference. Talking about LED and micro LED. You mentioned already 1.2. That's I mean, you can have it as SMD and a micro LED. But the micro LED, the price point, it has dropped dramatically. And it seems to be a very attractive thing between 1.2 and 1.6 mil.
I think it's very attractive nowadays, but I have to admit that from my perspective as an integrator, for us it's more important to look at the specs in order or regarding how can we install it. Is it easy to install? Do we have a lot of defects when we install it? I mean, this happens all the time. Well, I mean, it's still very fragile. So if you build the whole LED wall, for us it's very important that it's I would say fail-proof, that our technicians, even they're educated and certificated for this, that's easy for them, cabling, stability of the single panels and of the cabinets, so that we don't damage the wall. And I think this is something, even for the customers in the daily use, because people tend to tap the wall and put their finger on that you have something with a coating, that the edges are very stable. I think that's even more important than the technology behind it. But from my perspective, you only see the difference when you have it side by side. So as long as you don't have this, you're fine with the regular 1.2 millimeter and then standard technology.
Thank you, Oliver, for being here today, and it was really interesting to get a better understanding of the other side of the business, because we at invidis, we just look at the larger stories, obviously, and so thank you for coming to our show today.
Thank you for the invitation, Florian. It was a pleasure.
So Florian, let's talk about our project of the year 2020, Adidas flagship store in London. But to be honest, it's a 2019 project, but it was realized or opened end of 2019, so it still counts for 2020.
Yeah.
You were there. Tell us about it.
I was there a few times. Well, I first saw it, when we got the press release, from Adidas announcing it, and they said, we integrated 100 digital touch points in there. I said, okay, I have to go there. So I hopped on the plane and flew there, and since then I've been there many times. And it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. It's in the middle of Oxford Street. It's one of these, brand temples, something similar like Nike has in Shanghai or New York or so, many floors, and it's all about the brand, it's all about the product. It's a very emotional thing, and it's one of these flagship installations which do so much more than just selling product. It's really about building up a brand and making fans out of customers.
Yeah, it's a bit easier for sports brands because they are these strong big brands, very emotional. But let's start with the outside.
Well, it's a historical building, mesh LED on the windows, so that's always helpful. From far away, it makes almost no difference. It looks nice. You have some, movement and some dynamic on the facade. But from the inside, it doesn't look like everything is close. You see, still street light and everything. You enter the store, you have a huge area, promotion area, which looks different every few weeks. When they launch a new product or so. And obviously, in these flagship stores, they have lots of budget. So it's always done very nicely and very creative or so. It looks really cool.
But it's also very important because you have to keep the stories fresh. And I think you told me that the different floors were designed by different designers as well.
Absolutely. There are 4 or 5 floors, and everyone looks very different. It's not only that the different sports is presented there, but it's really telling stories, creating stories, and making sure people visit all of the floors and get an idea what the brand has to offer.
Yeah. So when you enter, you talked about this the special promotion area, but what else do you find inside the store?
Well, first floor, football, obviously, or soccer for the US guys, but over here it's football. And it's full of jerseys. It's really, it really shows, and it's so emotional. You can see the different jerseys, you can see the footballs, everything in action. So it's done really, really nicely.
Yeah. And then there's the local reference with LDN London. But I think it's a test store for Adidas as well. They won't put 100 digital touchpoints in all of their stores.
Unfortunately not, but here it's just like a kid in a toy store, or a candy store. It's fantastic. It's lots of things to see, and you can test things out, and it's done really, really nicely. And everything is fully integrated, and not only from the visual side, but also from data side, which is really convincing.
Yeah, and I think mobile plays a very important role when you talk about data. Really, the integration from the online world, or the mobile world in this case, with the physical store.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, really, you can, you just take the app, take a photo of a product, and tell them the size, and then somebody comes, and brings you exactly this shoe or this jersey or so. So it's really this nice integration. And obviously, Adidas, I think they're using Salesforce. They collect all the information, so that helps them a lot.
And it helps to have a own app and own the store and be fully integrated in that case. So you also have all the data and all the pictures and all the inventory data as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely necessary. That's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. So let's talk about the very visible parts, LED walls in that store.
Lots of LED, probably a dozen or more, but one is quite striking, and this is where they integrated a LED wall into a shelf system. So you have the boots, on the shelf, and you have a big LED backdrop, and it really tells story from far away. It's really, really fascinating.
And you can have the local story for the product. Right?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. You can tell stories and everything. It's just the only challenge a little bit, to put the right lighting on the product. So, but it's done really, really nice. And it's something which is striking and which really, tells stories.
Then we have to talk about something we always talk about: fitting rooms.
Yes. Fitting rooms are the magic. They have obviously their magic mirrors, where you with RFID you enter your fitting room, and it tells exactly what kind of products you have with you, what sizes they are, everything, and it shows you the whole story of the product, what kind of sizes are available, and if you need something else, you press a button and somebody comes, and brings you the other stuff. Some fitting rooms next to it, they also have just a big 98-inch screen, I think, so it's huge, and you can take selfies of yourself. It's very tiny, but you can put in this jersey, and it shows you in the background the stadium of your favorite club, which is really nice. Yeah.
But when you realize 100 touch points, not all of them can be fantastic. So we have a couple of them, or one specific.
Well, the projection stuff is not perfect. Could have been with laser. Would have looked much better, and but. That's the way it is, Not everything can be perfect. Yeah.
But one of the highlights of the store definitely is the gamification area with a LED floor, lots of sensors in the ceiling, also LED wall. What happens there?
Yeah, that's fascinating. Many sports brands have that. This Puma has it, Nike has it. They have this, court where you can play around or so digitally and with real balls. So that's something Adidas also has. But for me, fascinating is how fast you can transform that to a totally different scenario. And I went there one evening, and the next morning, the store almost looked totally different, especially this area, because they have this special, retail system which is suspended from the ceiling. It's one of these display systems, multi-lane. And one day, there was this big game area, and the next morning, you had all these things hanging from the ceiling, displays and the sensors and everything. So the whole area transformed into a stage.
Yeah, and that's what we really like. I mean, that's the adaptability of spaces and really creating these adaptive stores to keep stories fresh. And all of that.
Yeah, and talking about fresh, absolutely. There's also a lot of services, which are unique to the store. There's a sneaker bar. You can bring in your sneakers. They wash your sneakers. They repair them or so. So talking about sustainability, which becomes more and more important. It's also one of the points. So really driving traffic to the store and telling always new stories, something which the store is very convincing.
So next time you go to London, that's a definite must-see.
Absolutely. Welcome to our next segment. And we often get asked by customers, by clients, by the digital signage industry, how to innovate, especially in times like this, and especially when budgets are not as big as they've been in the past. And we always look for best practice. And one of the best practice we found is Starbucks. Starbucks has done a fantastic job in creating something which is not home, which is not work, but which is somewhere a third place. They call it the third place. And we looked at some of their strategies and some of their marketing and some of their ideas which they've rolled out across the world. And we believe there's a lot to learn from. So for the next few minutes, I want to show you what Starbucks is all about. I'm sure you've all been to Starbucks. Starbucks operates 33,000 stores. They call them stores worldwide. Most of them operated by themselves, but often also by franchise partners. And the really interesting thing is what they do to drive traffic. And a great example was shortly after the lockdown in 2020, the first thing they did was putting Zoom backgrounds on their website, because they know lots of gig workers, who spend almost all day long in a Starbucks coffee. They were missing their third place. So what they said, they put some backgrounds on their website so people could download them, and and when they talked with their colleagues on Zoom or Teams or so, they got the same feeling as being in the coffee place. Very smart investment, almost null, zero. So what makes Starbucks so special? We believe it's the experience in the store, it's innovation, they're very innovative, loyalty, they have a great loyalty crowd and a loyalty program, and architecture. And architecture is very important for the immersive experience. The digital signage industry usually doesn't like Starbucks because they don't believe into digital menu boards. Well, the digital signage industry believes, but obviously Starbucks doesn't. Because for them, Starbucks decided to have a European coffee concept, made in America. And for them, a European coffee place doesn't have screens. So unfortunately, the majority of their Starbucks coffee places are without digital screens. But this is changing now, because 80% of the transactions in North America are to-go transaction. That means people go inside the store, pick up their coffee, go home, or they use the drive-through. More and more of the Starbucks coffees are now having drive-thrus. So drive-thrus become a very, very important thing, not only for them, but for all QSR suppliers in North America. And so you see high brightness screens, a lot of high brightness screens in the drive-thru. That means digital signage companies are now really finding out that Starbucks can be a really interesting customer for them. And these digital screens are, in different lanes, and 3, 4, 5, 6 screens in one Starbucks. That's not untypical. Then it's about experiences. And what Starbucks is really good at is in their flagship stores. They call them reserve. So these are selected stores which are in some of the more exotic markets for them. In Italy, for example, that's the home of coffee. That's where the whole coffee culture was more or less started centuries ago. And that's in the heart of Milan. They opened their own roastery there. And it's fantastic. It's almost like a Disneyland for coffee. You enter it and it's full of emotion. You hear sound. You can see a huge bar. It's a restaurant there. Merchandise, everything is there. Obviously, you also get lots of coffee there. And the whole thing is just a fascinating experience. And this is what Starbucks is really good at. Lots and lots of social, shareable moments. And then you also detect some signage there. One of the interesting things is the split flap displays. Yes, they look very nostalgic, and that's probably what was the idea behind it for Starbucks to decide, we don't like screens in our stores, but we like something which looks nostalgic, which has like a European feeling to it. And yes, split flap displays, you all remember the sound, they have them there and they're quite nicely integrated. So next time you're close to one of the reserves, have a look at them, it's really nice. Other innovative ideas they have, they were one of the first ones to work together with Nintendo, with the Pokemon Go. So they really, sat down with them and said, how can we drive traffic to our stores? And they said, okay, let's place an arena, one of these Pokemon Go arenas, in one of the stores. That automatically drove traffic to their stores. Nice idea, investment close to zero. Another great idea is their cooperation with Spotify. So they really decided, in-store music is such an integral part of the experience of visiting a Starbucks store. They decided, okay, we cooperate with Spotify. So the playlist of their restaurants are available for download, so you can enjoy them at home. And they also gave free premium membership, Spotify membership to their employees, so they can also, enjoy the spirit of Spotify at home, of Starbucks at home. Quite good idea. Last but not least, they really looked at how can we be even closer with our guests, And many of them are using Teams, especially since the pandemic. So Teams is almost like the new operating system for the office. You use it all the time for chatting, for starting new video conference and everything. And now also they developed an app. So there's a small Starbucks app on your Teams platform. So you can choose your next video conference, or you can choose to order your Starbucks coffee. It's always being where the customers are. And customers in offices nowadays spend a lot of time on the Teams operating system. Another thing being innovative is understanding cultures. And Starbucks decided to start a joint venture with a private equity company in China to invest into Chinese startups to better understand how Chinese are shopping and how Chinese enjoy tea and coffee. And so I think quite a smart move how to mix digital into your existing business model. Shared workspaces. Well, in the US, Starbucks was famous for gig workers, sitting all day on a small table. But in Japan or in other countries, it's a little bit different. So in Japan, they basically integrated a WeWork into a Starbucks. So you buy your coffee and downstairs, and you go upstairs, and you have little small rooms where you can work. Quite smart. Again, understanding cultural needs. And in Japan, working is different than in the US, for example. And last but not least, adapting to local needs also means understanding, what kind of buildings people like to go. And they were quite smart. In Malta, for example, they have an old cellar where Starbucks is integrated. In Istanbul, a 500-year-old building. Or in other parts of the world, they take local architecture and mix it what Starbucks is all about. So to give local people, a feeling that Starbucks is a mixture of Western lifestyle and their local culture. Quite smart. So these were just a few ideas, and we're looking forward when we travel around the world in 2021 to look at different retailers, at Starbucks and other places, and to look how they adapt their concept to local needs. Very interesting, and we hope you join us there. Thank you. Stefan, we have talked a lot about last year, 2020, the pandemic. Now let's have an outlook. What kind of trends do we identify, and what do we see, coming in 2021? To start off with, the first trend, hybrid in office, in retail and events.
Yeah, it's really the big trends we want to talk about. And not only cars are hybrid or become hybrid, it's really also the business becomes hybrid. And before the crisis, we understood very well what it means to do an event, so a conference or a trade show. We knew what an office would look like and what you would do in an office. And offline retail was very clear why you would go there. Now, during the crisis with lockdown, we learned how all of that works purely online. So online shopping, work from home, and virtual events. But now the question becomes, once we go back after lockdown, what a hybrid world really means. Because it's not just being on one side or the other, but really mixing it. Having people, for example, in the office, part of the people are in the office and part of the people are working from home.
And how to intertwine that. And for the event world, for example, we can say the hybrid business model is broken. So the question is, how can we create new business model? How can we create more value for customers, for consumers, for B2B world to really invest and support that?
Yeah, and in the retail world, the question has been around for quite a while with the omni-channel term. That's exactly the question. How do you make that work between a mobile online world and a physical world? Where are the business models? How do they work?
Second trend, understanding the customer.
Yeah, that's always important, obviously, but especially with the amounts of data that are collected. We have lots of customers asking us what additional data can we collect. But the key question is, what do you do with the data? How do you really understand your customers better? And then the question becomes, what's the deal between you and your customer? Because the old models, like selling targeted ads for data, is broken. That doesn't work any longer. Also, the free services for data deal, that needs to be renegotiated.
Because of GDPR also.
Yeah, that's part of the story, but also customer acceptance is a big question there. And really, companies need to find how to create value from the data they are getting. The question always also is, what kind of data do you need to collect? And then how do you provide that data to your customers, and how do you capture some of that value?
And one of the small, tiny trends, only not diving too deep into the thing, is edge computing, for example, right? I mean, analyzing as much data as possible right on the spot, because that's the only way to do it GDPR compliant.
Yeah, that's right, and that's part of the story.
So it's not the cloud, it's the edge, funnily enough. Yeah. Next one, activating the customer.
Yeah, once you understand your customer, the question is, how do you get them back into the office? How do you get them back into the stores?
Engaging with brand.
Yeah, that's really play the whole spectrum of things you can do to activate the customer. And what's true for retail is also true for the office. I mean, people get used to working from home. The question is, why should they go back to the office? And Vitra put it very well. And they said, ask yourself the questions, or they asked themselves the questions, why should people return to the office? And they came up with a couple of points, and that's people are seeking inspiration in the office. They need a feeling of identity, of Heimat, of belonging, of community, and also of collaboration. I mean, you don't need to go back to the office to sit at your desk and work on your own. That's probably something you can do better at home. But if you want to be creative with your colleagues, you need a place to go to. And I mean, being creative really needs the physical interaction.
But that means the office of the future will look totally different. Will be more like a lounge. People will, look forward to come there, to mingle with their colleagues, to create new things, especially for these creative processes. They believe, and we also believe, in the physical place where you meet is important.
Yeah. And at the same time, you need the digital tools to actually bridge the two worlds. You need the digital tools to be able to collaborate in a hybrid world.
And again, the hybrid story. It's very easy to have a video conference where everyone is at home, but it's very difficult to get a common sense out of this one if half of the people are sitting in one room and the rest is, spread apart in their home offices. So that makes it really difficult. Yeah.
And you can ask the same question also for retail. And why should people return to a store? And that would be they are seeking inspiration, they are seeking experience, really touching and experiencing a brand. They are looking for affirmation. They are looking for gratification, for belonging, and for socializing. I mean, going to the city with your friends, do some shopping, go to a cafe afterwards. That's part of the fun of going shopping.
Yeah, that's the stuff we're missing so much currently.
Yeah, you can't do that online.
Yeah, that's true.
Really, really difficult. Have an online coffee.
Next trend, Stefan, the new high street ecosystem. That sounds very complicated, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, that has to do with the rise of e-commerce and mobile commerce. We are seeing that traditional retail is becoming under extreme pressure, and that has an impact on high streets, on inner cities. In the US, you have the effect on the malls, where you don't have the concept of a high street. And there, if you can see the high street as an ecosystem. It's not only retail. In the past, it was very retail focused. On traditional German Einkaufsstraße, you would have one retailer next to the other. And that model probably won't survive. It's becoming under pressure because you have store closures, you have brands retracting from markets, focusing just on some flagship locations, and that might lead to cities really dying in the worst case. But in a good case, this ecosystem can heal itself, but it needs more players. It doesn't just need the brands and the stores, it needs also the surroundings, so the city planners, it needs
restaurants, hospitality, offices, even apartments, living.
Yeah,
the mix. It's all about the mix.
All about finding that new equilibrium in that ecosystem, so it works again. And it's a matter of stores and brands working together with policymakers and also working together with city planners. And we have an example, for example, in Paris, they are planning to redo Champs-Élysées basically as a green mile within the city. So it's really fun to go there. I mean, currently it's I think 8 lanes of traffic on Champs-Élysées, and that's not necessarily a place you want to spend time.
But the infrastructure needs to be also, to be attractive and digital. So also digital out of home, for example, out of home, they can provide, that's what's necessary for the ecosystem of the future in the city. Stefan, last but not least, but it's very close to our heart, sustainability and green signage.
Yeah, that's the whole topic is a very hot one, and that won't go away because consumers are demanding it, and companies need to take their position on that topic. Therefore, it's on the CEO's agenda, and CEOs really think hard about how can I position my company as a sustainable company. And it's not about just buying some certificates and telling people, okay, in 20 years from now, we're going to be carbon neutral. But it's really about what do you do to make your company sustainable. And that's also a big oh to the digital signage industry.
Yeah, there's quite interesting. And you see this trend, coming up, especially in recent days, with CES and everything. You said, oh, we have like remote controls with solar in it, we have cartons, the boxes are not printed anymore. These are small steps. But obviously, there's also some bigger things, some bigger levers like power consumption. That's something which really takes place. And then having the right operational concept, Sometimes just, turning off screens a little bit earlier, not having them running until midnight, or activating the sensors so brightness is automatic controlled. These are all things where you can be greener, but it's definitely a very, very interesting topic, and customers are demanding it, especially in the Nordics, and it's also coming now to the rest of Europe.
Yeah. So these are the topics that will keep us up at night during the coming month. And we are very interested also to hear from you what you think about these topics. If you have examples for us where companies actually have found solutions to these topics already. But that's definitely going to be an ongoing discussion throughout the year.
Yeah, please leave your comments down here and or send us a mail. And we're looking forward to 2021. Thank you, Stefan. That was our second show from Munich. Next week we're going
back to Berlin.
Exactly, and we hope we will all see you here back at Munich Airport in September for DSS Europe. But before we talk about our next event here in Munich, we would like to invite you to join us at IEC in Barcelona, beginning of June. Hopefully a little bit warmer than currently here. So let's see you there.
And as always, please leave your comments below or send us an email.